Part 1. The good daughter dies first. I've spent most of my life learning how to swallow my own joy. When I got married 8 months ago, I thought I'd finally escaped that habit, finally chosen something for myself, not for the performance, not for approval, just because it felt like home. But when I stood at the altar and saw the empty seats in the front row where my parents were supposed to be, I knew I had only escaped part of the story. The wound was still there, just wearing a prettier dress. My name is Rebecca. I'm 32. I married a man who sees me, not who I could become, not who I should be, but me. He asked me to marry him while we were sharing takeout on our couch, half watching reruns and talking about whether we should finally paint the hallway. It was quiet, undramatic, and somehow more romantic than anything I ever imagined. I should have known something was wrong when I told my parents we were engaged and got silence in return. Not even fake smiles, just a cold, heavy pause. Then my mother said, "Are you sure you're ready? Maybe you should work on your appearance a bit before jumping in." My father? He said nothing at all, just went back to reading something on his phone. It was like I'd told them I'd bought new curtains, not that I was starting a life with someone who adored me. I've always been the invisible daughter. That's not self-pity, that's just data. My younger sister, Molin, is the golden one. Tall, slender, breathtaking in photos. She won her first spelling bee in kindergarten and never stopped. Valedictorian, class president, homecoming queen, modeling contracts in college. Business degree, corner office by 30. I have a perfectly good job as a mid-level software developer at a respected company. I build things that work, systems that keep people connected. It's not flashy, but it makes me proud. My parents have never once asked what I'm working on, but they threw a party for Molin's first modeling headshot, had it framed. It still hangs over the fireplace like a shrine. The same year I graduated with a degree in computer science, they said, "Well done," then asked if Molin needed help with her next photo shoot. That's the family dynamic in a nutshell. As a child, I tried everything to earn their love. I enrolled in clubs they suggested, wore clothes they picked, even tried modeling once, just to see if I could become the daughter they wanted. That particular humiliation didn't last long. I still remember Molin laughing at my headshots behind my back. But not quietly enough. Eventually, I stopped trying. Not because I made peace with it, but because I got tired. The ache of never being enough began to erode me. So I did what anyone would do. I found my own oxygen. I found friends who made me feel seen, coworkers who respected me, a therapist who didn't blink when I told her I'd spent 20 years learning how to smile at my mother's insults about my body. And then I found him, the man who would become my husband, who said I was beautiful without comparison, who marveled at my mind, my humor, the small things that always felt invisible in my family. When he proposed, it felt like being chosen, finally. Not as second best, not as someone's backup daughter, as me. That should have been the turning point, a chapter of new beginnings. Instead, it was the beginning of the unraveling. Part 2, the RSVP that never came. It started with silence. Not dramatic silence, just the kind that slowly suffocates you, the kind that makes you question your own memory. Had I sent the invitation? Yes. I double-checked it, triple-checked it. We use both email and traditional mail. My fiancé and I cross-reference addresses. His tech-savvy sister helped me set up digital receipts, and I saw their names clearly marked read, but no reply. No RSVP, no congratulations, not even a "we'll see." I texted, I called, I emailed. My messages were either ignored or met with vague delays. "We're very busy right now. Your father and I need to check our calendars." as if their schedules needed aligning to attend their own daughter's wedding. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they were overwhelmed. Maybe something had gone wrong. I refused to entertain the possibility that they were doing this deliberately. Not then, not yet. I distracted myself with the planning, florals, playlists, table layouts. My future in-laws stepped in with such warmth that I sometimes forgot what I was missing. My fiance's mother, gentle and curious, asked me which dress made me feel most like myself. She cried when she saw me in my final fitting. My own mother had simply said, "It's practical for your body type," before walking off. I felt like I was borrowing someone else's mom, and that broke me more than I admitted at the time. On the day of the wedding, the air was soft and kind, one of those rare days where the world feels like it's giving you a break. Everything was in place. We had an intimate garden ceremony surrounded by people who loved us. There was laughter, music, genuine celebration, but there were also their absences. I noticed them every time I turned to look at the front row. 2 empty chairs. I had planned to skip the father-daughter dance. I didn't want to cry in front of everyone. But when the song started playing and there was no one to offer me a hand, the tears came anyway. Quiet, behind my bouquet, my new mother-in-law whispered, "They missed something beautiful." She was right, but it didn't make it hurt less. I didn't reach out during the honeymoon. I needed space to be happy, at least for a few days, to pretend the wound wasn't still open. But when we got home, I called them. I wanted to believe there was a reason, something, anything I could hold on to make sense of what they'd done. My mother picked up, her voice sharp like a knife dulled by years of resentment. She launched into a tirade about how hurt they were that they never received a formal invitation, how I had excluded them on purpose, how she always imagined helping plan her daughter's wedding and couldn't understand why I had shut them out. I sat there in stunned silence, scrolling through the confirmation emails, the red receipts, the delivery notices, everything confirmed. They'd received both versions of the invitation. I could have confronted her. I could have shown her proof. But I didn't. Instead, I simply said, "I'm sorry if you felt left out," and hung up. It wasn't surrender. It was strategy. I didn't have the strength to argue with people who had rewritten the truth to fit their shame. Later that night, my husband told me he'd overheard them at the engagement party, whispering into my mother's phone in the corner, talking to Molin. She was crying. My parents were murmuring things like this wasn't the plan, and we never expected Rebecca to get married first. I laughed when he told me, not because it was funny, because it was absurd. They weren't mourning a lost invitation. They were mourning their fantasy. In their version of reality, Molin was supposed to be the bride. The spotlight was supposed to land on her. And I had ruined the script. I was an interruption, a glitch in their image of the perfect family. Part 3, the perfect daughter's Pinterest wedding. If I'd been smarter, or maybe just less desperate, I would have seen it all sooner. The wedding that never happened. The one my mother had been planning for years, long before Molin had a boyfriend worth naming. Pinterest boards, venue folders, color schemes, bridal magazines spread across our kitchen table long after Molin had moved out. And now that I'd gone off script and gotten married first, it was like I had stolen a crown meant for someone else. I saw it in the way my mother skimmed past my dress photos but squealed over lace samples for Molin. I saw it in the way they spoke about Molin's eventual wedding as if it were some divine coronation, and mine had been a speed bump. Even after I got engaged, my mother didn't stop collecting screenshots of designer gowns and celebrity bridal updos. She just stopped sending them to me. She had already made her choice. She was waiting for the wedding that would impress, the wedding that would count. So I shouldn't have been surprised when I found out that she hadn't even offered to help with my own. Not with the venue, not with the flowers, not with the guest list. She made one vague comment about my A-line gown being flattering for broader figures, then went silent again. In the end, I planned my entire wedding with my future mother-in-law and my husband. We laughed, we cried, we built something that reflected who we were. And they weren't there to see it. Instead, they waited. They waited for Mole, and she finally got engaged last month. Some guy she's known for a year who drives a Tesla and works in strategic investments. The kind of guy my parents would clear the calendar for. They started posting immediately, gushing about her fiancé, the ring, the proposal at the vineyard. I watched from a distance. I'm not in the family group chats. I'm not tagged in any of the photos. But word still travels. Apparently my mother has already booked appointments for couture fittings with Molin. She's treating her to designer shoes and private cake tastings. They're picking between 3 luxury venues, and my father has offered to pay for valet parking, a live orchestra, and a helicopter send-off. All of that for a daughter who's been engaged for 6 weeks. And still not a word about mine. But here's where things started to shift. Quietly. Unexpectedly. One by one, relatives started reaching out. A cousin here, an aunt there. People who hadn't said much during my wedding mess. Suddenly, they wanted to talk. I'm not sure I'll be going to Molin's wedding, my cousin said over coffee. Not after what your parents pulled at yours. I blinked. Wait, how do you know? Everyone knows. Apparently, what my parents had worked so hard to hide had already begun to unravel. They'd built this elaborate image of a united, perfect family, with Molin at its center. But my wedding became the first crack, and their refusal to attend, a spotlight on everything they'd spent years trying to obscure. I always wondered why they never talked about you, another relative said. Now I get it. You're not the daughter they brag about, but that doesn't mean you're not the one who's been doing the hard work. I didn't cry when she said that. I thought I might, but instead I felt relief. It wasn't just me. It had never been just me. They had been telling one story, but now people were starting to ask about the other side, and I was finally ready to tell it. Part 4. I was never the favorite, but I was always the truth. I used to wonder what it would feel like to be the favorite, to walk into a room and see my parents' faces light up, to have my successes framed and hung on walls, toasted at parties, passed around like sacred relics. Instead, I learned how to disappear. At birthdays, Molin's updates overshadowed my candles. At graduation, she had a call back from a modeling agency that somehow mattered more than my degree. I remember once in high school, my mother canceled my celebratory dinner because Molin had an emergency spray tan appointment. I wish I were exaggerating. I wasn't angry back then. Not in the way I am now. I was just confused, always second-guessing my worth, scanning for some missed instruction manual that might teach me how to earn what came to Molin effortlessly. It didn't matter how many times I showed up, succeeded quietly, made the safe choices. The love I got was polite, measured, conditional. But what happened after my wedding broke something in me that I can never pretend is whole again. My parents called me a week after the family started asking questions. I could hear the tension in their voices, tight, brittle, rehearsed. They weren't calling to apologize. They were calling to save face. They accused me of telling lies, said I was poisoning the family against them because I was jealous of Molin's upcoming wedding. My father said, "You've always been sensitive," and my mother followed up with, "This is not how we raised you." I snapped, not in rage, but in clarity. "You're right," I said. "I am jealous, not of her success, not her looks. I'm jealous of the love you've given her without question, the support, the attention, the pride, the parts of parenting I never got." There was silence on the line. Then my mother said I was exaggerating, that they loved us both equally, that I was creating drama where there was none. And something broke open in me. I began listing everything, each forgotten birthday, each time my accomplishments were overshadowed, each hurtful comment about my weight, each wedding task she ignored. I didn't yell. I just told the truth. My father tried to interrupt. My mother said I was being spiteful. Then she said the line I'll never forget. "We never imagined you'd go so far as to sabotage your sister's wedding out of resentment, but we always knew you were insecure about her." That's when I stopped. Not because I ran out of words, but because I realized they had never actually heard me. Not once. Everything I said was filtered through their version of who I was. The jealous sister, the insecure daughter, the disappointment I'd always hoped deep down, childishly, that if I just explained myself well enough, they would understand. But you can't explain yourself into someone else's reality if they've already decided what role you're allowed to play. So I said quietly, "You're right, I was raised by you. And you taught me to believe I would never be enough. That Molin's achievements mattered more than mine. That my feelings were obstacles to your perfect family story." And then I hung up. Not with anger, with finality. I cried afterward, but they weren't the sobs I used to know. The kind that left me empty and panicked. These tears were clean. They were mine. I had finally said what needed saying, and they could no longer pretend not to know. Part 5. My sister tried to manipulate my husband, and it backfired. If I ever needed confirmation that my sister saw me not as family but as a rival to be managed, it came in the form of a text message, sent not to me, but to my husband. I had blocked her the day before. She had sent me a long, condescending message laced with sugar-coated insults, that I was insecure, bitter, ruining the family legacy, and trying to make her wedding about myself, my personal favorite. Not everything is a competition, Rebecca. Said by the woman whose entire life had been staged like an Olympic event, with me as the uninvited warm-up act. I didn't reply. I'd read it once, felt the sting, and then calmly blocked her number. She couldn't handle that. That evening, my husband called me at work, barely able to speak through his laughter. Molin had somehow gotten his private number, probably from a mutual acquaintance, and launched her next campaign. Her message read like a press release, polite on the surface, but you could feel the judgment dripping through. As Rebecca's sister and someone invested in the integrity of our family, I felt compelled to reach out. It went downhill from there. She told him in no uncertain terms that it was now his job to help me develop more appropriate emotional responses, that I was sensitive and prone to misinterpretation, and that perhaps he, being the rational partner, could help guide me back toward family unity. She said he should encourage me to stop spreading unproductive narratives, and that maintaining ties with high-achieving family members like herself would be mutually beneficial to his professional future. Let me say that again. She tried to emotionally manipulate my husband and bribe him with the possibility of business connections, as if my marriage was a PR liability to manage My husband, God bless him, didn't even get angry. He just laughed. This woman really thinks I want access to her LinkedIn circle more than I care about your peace, he said. When I got home, we read the text together. I didn't cry. I didn't fume. I laughed too. For the first time in my life, I wasn't alone in bearing the absurdity of my family. Someone else saw it, saw her for what she really was, and he chose me. 10 years ago, her words would have wrecked me. I would have spiraled, torn between defending myself and wondering if she was right. I would have written long, anxious emails, tried to patch things up, tried to explain my heart until it hurt. Now I felt like I had finally been freed from a spell I didn't even know I was under. Later that night, my husband texted her back, "Thank you for your concern. As Rebecca's husband, my only job is to support her happiness, not to manage her emotional reactions for you. I think it's best if you speak to her directly. Have a nice day." She sent one final message. "I see she's poisoned you too." Don't say I didn't try to help when this all blows up in your faces. That was the moment I realized something fundamental. Molin doesn't want reconciliation. She wants control. She's not trying to fix the family. She's trying to preserve her throne. But here's the thing about losing a war you never signed up for. You start to realize you don't need to win it. You just need to walk away. And I was already walking. Part 6. Letting the truth speak for itself. I didn't think it would happen like this. I didn't think the reckoning would come, not with a confrontation, but with quiet conversations in living rooms and backyards, with cousins I hadn't spoken to in years pulling me aside to whisper, "We always wondered," or "You didn't deserve that." I didn't have to wage war. I didn't have to shout. All I did was tell the truth. And it turned out that my family had been waiting for someone to say it out loud. The truth has a way of echoing. After Molin's messages failed to manipulate my husband, my parents went into damage control mode. They started calling relatives one by one, trying to get ahead of the narrative. They said I had deliberately left them out of the wedding, that I was jealous of Molin's big day, that I was spreading vicious rumors to make myself look like the victim. They told one story, but everyone else had already started to hear another, and this time they weren't buying the edited version. My parents forgot something critical. They've been this way forever. People noticed things. They remembered how they fawned over Molin's modeling contract while barely mentioning my first job. They remembered the lavish parties for her birthdays and the last-minute cake for mine. One aunt even told me, quietly, that my mother had once sabotaged her daughter's wedding, refusing to attend because Molin had a hair appointment that day. It turns out I wasn't the first, just the one who finally spoke. Suddenly, Molin's engagement wasn't drawing the enthusiastic RSVPs they'd hoped for. Several family members declined invitations. A few never responded at all. One relative who was supposed to host the rehearsal dinner pulled out for personal reasons. And then came the call from my uncle, my father's older brother. He's always been quiet, a peacekeeper, the one who stays on the fence. But this time he stepped down from the sidelines. "I should have said something years ago," he said. "I saw how they treated you. I was just afraid of rocking the boat." He told me he and his wife wouldn't be attending Molin's wedding. Not out of spite, but out of principle. He said, "We're too old to pretend anymore." It was the kind of quiet solidarity I didn't know I needed. For so long, I had convinced myself that speaking out would make things worse, that telling the truth would isolate me even more. Instead, it was the opposite. Telling the truth brought me back to people who were waiting to be honest too. Even people I barely knew. Second cousins, old neighbors, started reaching out. "We always felt something was off," one of them messaged. "You deserved better." And here's the wildest part. I wasn't even asking for validation anymore. but I got it. Not because I demanded it, because I let go of the script and told the story as I lived it. Part 7. The family image they died to protect is falling apart. My parents spent their lives polishing a mirror they couldn't bear to look into. They spent so long building the perfect picture, I think they started believing it was real. The golden daughter, the elegant home, the flawless holidays, the wedding of the century, always coming someday. All of it scripted like a play where I was either cast as the supporting role or quietly written out. And now the stage is crumbling. It didn't fall with a scandal, no dramatic outburst, no explosive confrontation. It cracked under the weight of too many contradictions, too many people watching, too many whispered questions they couldn't control anymore. I didn't lift a finger. The only thing I did was stop pretending. When the invitations to Molin's engagement party went out, the silence from our extended family was deafening. The RSVP list, once assumed to be a formality, was thinner than expected. Then, the excuses started rolling in. Scheduling conflicts, health issues, vague travel plans. But I knew what it really was. No one wanted to co-sign the performance anymore. At a recent family gathering, someone made the mistake of asking about my wedding pictures. Just a simple, innocent question. My mother exploded. She launched into a panicked defense, rattling off how they were never invited, how they'd been so hurt by the exclusion, how I'd changed after getting married and was now dividing the family with lies. But it backfired, because by now, everyone knew about the read receipts, the proof of delivery, the tears I shed alone. Her meltdown only confirmed what people had begun to suspect. This wasn't about logistics. This was about pride, control, fear. And suddenly, the perfect family they'd worked so hard to portray was visibly fractured, on display not as a picture of grace, but as a warning of what happens when you love one child at the cost of the other. Even their old excuses don't work anymore. They claimed I'd sent invitations to outdated addresses, despite living in the same home for 30 years. They said I'd used an old email when they've only ever had one. The lies were flimsy, desperate, and people noticed. An aunt who owns a bridal boutique quietly canceled Molin's dress fittings, citing scheduling issues. A cousin who was supposed to photograph the engagement party pulled out with a simple, "I'm not available." One by one, the pillars holding up their illusion began stepping away, not because of revenge, because of respect. They saw the way I was treated, and they finally believed it. My parents are spinning, calling relatives, scrambling to recover their image, accusing me of sabotage. But I haven't said a word since that last phone call. I don't need to. Turns out the truth doesn't need a microphone. People were already listening, and it is loud. Part 8. I let go of the fantasy and found peace. There's a moment after the storm ends when everything feels unfamiliar. You expect calm, maybe even relief, but instead there's silence. Not the heavy, suffocating kind I used to know, but a spacious, echoing quiet that asks, now what? For the first time in my life, I didn't care what happened at Molin's wedding. I didn't check who went. I didn't scroll through photos. I didn't ask for updates. It's not that I wasn't curious. It's that I'd finally stopped needing to compare my life to hers. That hunger for validation, for fairness, for approval, it had ruled me for decades. Every choice I made was filtered through an invisible lens. Would this make them proud? Would they finally see me? And now I didn't want their gaze. I wanted my own. There's a grief in that kind of freedom, not the grief of loss, but the grief of release, of realizing that the people you spent your whole life trying to impress were never capable of seeing you in the first place, that they weren't withholding love from you because you weren't lovable, but because they only knew how to love what reflected back their ideal image. I was never going to be that mirror. I didn't have the right angles. And now I'm done trying to twist myself into shapes that might make me shine in their eyes. I sit with my husband on our porch some nights and watch the sun go down. He never asks me to explain myself. He never tries to fix what I'm feeling. He just sits there, present, gentle, steady. "You're never going to change them," he said to me one night after my final phone call with my parents. "I know," I replied, "but I don't need them to change anymore." And I meant it. What I needed was something they never could give: to believe that I am enough without permission, to speak without asking if my voice was welcome, to choose joy without guilt. They raised me to crave their praise, but somewhere along the way they also accidentally taught me something else, something they never intended, that I deserve better. And I finally believe it. Part 9. I stopped playing the victim and started living my life. It didn't happen all at once. There was no thunderclap, no big cinematic moment where I stood in front of a mirror and declared I was done with it all. Healing, I've learned, is more subtle than that. It's less like burning bridges and more like slowly walking away from a house you finally realize is not safe to live in. And that's what I've been doing, quietly, day by day. I stopped replaying their words in my head. I stopped scanning for updates on Molin's wedding. I stopped crafting hypothetical conversations in the shower, ones where they finally apologized, where I finally won. Because I no longer need to win. I'm not in a competition anymore. And I'm not the victim either. Not because what happened wasn't real, but because I've stopped letting their choices define the meaning of my life. That's the part I never understood before. When you spend your whole life trying to get someone to treat you better, you become fused to their behavior, as if their cruelty holds the keys to your future. But it doesn't. Their silence, their favoritism, their betrayal, none of it determines my worth. And for the first time, I can say this without bitterness. They are who they are. I am who I am. And I get to choose how much of them I let into my story. So I'm rewriting it, not erasing the past, but reclaiming it. I now see that girl who cried in her childhood bedroom because her mother missed her school performance to buy Molin a prom dress. And I feel love for her. I see that woman standing there, no dad in the front row, no family in sight. And I just want to hug her. She still showed up for herself. That's brave as hell. I see myself, not the daughter they wanted, but the woman I've become in spite of it. And she is whole. Part 10. What healing actually looks like. Healing doesn't always look like what you think it will. It's not standing on a mountaintop, arms raised in victory. It's not dramatic declarations or family members falling to their knees in apology. That's the fantasy. The one we cling to because it makes pain feel like it had a purpose. Healing, real healing, it's not about winning. It's about finally breathing without holding your stomach in. It's less about vindication and more about stillness. It's standing in the kitchen at 9 a.m., making coffee, and realizing you no longer feel that tightness in your chest when your phone rings. It's looking in the mirror and not scanning for flaws your mother would have pointed out. It's walking past the wedding photo on your bookshelf and smiling, not because it was perfect, but because it was yours. It's waking up one day and understanding that the story you were born into doesn't have to be the story you carry forward. That's where I am now. I'm still a little bruised, I won't lie. There are days I catch myself wondering if they'll ever reach out. Not with conditions, not with guilt, but with something real. I wonder if my father thinks about the empty seat where he should have stood. I wonder if my mother ever replays the things she said, the things she didn't say. But I don't wait for it anymore. I've stopped building altars to a version of them that doesn't exist. I've stopped worshiping the idea of a family that looks right but feels wrong. I've started building a new one. A real one. It's just me and my husband and the people who love us without asking us to shrink. Friends who show up. Coworkers who laugh with me at lunch. Neighbors who wave. People who don't need me to perform worthiness to deserve their attention. I used to think healing meant proving to my parents that I was enough. Now I know it means believing it without their permission. I don't need an apology. I don't need justice. I don't even need closure. What I needed, what I finally gave myself, was peace. The absence of war in my own mind. The quiet confidence of knowing who I am. And that's the real ending. Not a perfect family reunion, not a triumphant confrontation, but a woman sitting on her porch at sunset, fingers intertwined with the man who chose her, heart beating in a rhythm that finally feels like her own. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe Mullen will get married in some elaborate, Instagram perfect affair. Maybe my parents will keep spinning their story. That's not my business anymore. I have a life to live, a gentle, ordinary, meaningful life. And for the first time, I believe I deserve it. If this story made you feel seen, drop a comment below. We read everyone. And if you're walking your own path to healing, subscribe and join this growing circle of survivors reclaiming their stories. Have you ever been the other sibling, the one left behind? Share your truth below and don't forget to subscribe for more raw, reflective family drama stories that go beneath the surface. Epilogue. For the ones who weren't chosen. If you're still here, still listening, maybe it's because you've lived some version of this story too. Maybe you've been the daughter who always got the second glance, the quiet pat on the back while your sibling got the standing ovation. Maybe you spent years contorting yourself into someone they could love, thinking that if you just lost a little weight, got the right job, wore the right smile, then they'd finally see you. Maybe like me, you spent your childhood reaching and your adulthood learning how to stop. I used to believe healing meant closure. Now I know it means freedom. Freedom from their stories. Freedom from performance. Freedom to live without narrating your worth to people who never learned how to listen. If you're walking away from a family that never truly saw you, I want to say this. You are not broken. You are not too much. You are not a disappointment. You are a whole person who learned to survive in a system that never valued your wholeness. And every step you take now toward honesty, toward peace, toward people who love you for your quiet, your rage, your beauty, your brilliance, is a step back home to yourself.